started with a single boot found half buried in the mud. The park rangers thought it belonged to a hiker lost to the cold or a bear, but when they dug it out and turned it over, there was a piece of flesh still inside, gray, mummified, and cleanly cut. Not torn, cut. That was the first clue, though no one in Red Hollow wanted to say what they all suspected. People had been going missing along that ridge for decades. Campers, hunters, drift. Folks said it was the mountains swallowing them whole. Others said it was the Barkers up north, or the mine collapses further west. But the old ones, those who still remembered the warriors, whispered something else. They said there were families so deep in the woods, they forgot the world had changed. Families that learned to live on more than deer. Eddie Collins wasn't supposed to be there that weekend. He'd taken a detour on his drive to Nashville, stopped to camp overnight, and never showed up again. His car was found off the service road, doors open, the driver's seat soaked through with rain. But what caught the rangers' attention was the way the forest felt different that morning. No birds, no wind. Even the air seemed heavy, as if the trees were holding their breath. Ranger Whitaker had worked those woods for 30 years. He'd seen floods, fires, and the kind of winters that froze people solid, but he'd never seen a quiet like that. The fog hung low, white and cold as smoke, and the trail leading toward Dead Man's Hollow was lined with strange mark circles burned into the trunks, almost like symbols. When Whitaker followed them, he found something worse than the boot, a pile of rocks stacked neatly in the shape of a cairn, and on top of it, a set of teeth tied together with twine. They sent a search team up the ridge 2 days later. 5 men, only 4 came back. The one who didn't was named Paul Dent, a retired logger with nerves of steel. The others said he wandered off when the fog thickened, calling out that he saw something moving just ahead. They heard him scream once, then nothing. When they reached the spot, there was a circle of blood in the leaves, and in the center, a single coin, old silver, worn smooth, stamped with the letter T. That was when Sheriff Marlowe got involved. He'd heard the stories since he was a boy, the ones his grandfather used to tell about the Turners, the family that lived past the mines, way beyond the map. They were supposed to be long gone, wiped out in the flood of '38, but the way his grandfather told it, the Turners never drowned. They just went deeper, deeper into the hollows, where no light reached and no law mattered. Marlowe didn't believe it, not really. He'd dealt with meth labs, hermits, and wild animals, but cannibals, that belonged in campfire stories. Still, when the second hiker vanished, he put together a team. He and 2 deputies followed the ridge at dawn, the forest wet and steaming after a night of rain. The deeper they went, the more the path seemed to change. Roots twisted in unnatural patterns. The air grew sour. Then they found the fence barbed wire, rusted and sagging, wrapped around trees like someone had tried to keep something in, not out. Beyond it lay the ruins of an old farmhouse. The roof had collapsed, and what remained of the porch leaned crookedly toward the earth. But what made Marlowe's skin crawl were the sounds coming from below. Not animals, not the wind. It was humming, slow, tuneless, human. He motioned to the others, stepped inside, and found the trapdoor half buried under a rug blackened by mold. The smell hit him the second he pulled it open. Rot, copper, wet soil. He shone his light down into the darkness and saw stairs carved from stone, slick with moisture. At the bottom, something glinted. He called out, voice shaking. "Hello, this is Sheriff Marlowe. You need to show yourself." The humming stopped. Then, from the dark, came a whisper. "Ain't no law down here." One of the deputies laughed nervously, but Marlowe's stomach turned cold. The whisper came again, closer now. "We've been waiting for you." He motioned for backup, but before anyone could move, a hand reached out from the dark pale, long-fingered, nails blackened, and grabbed his boot. He kicked free, stumbled backward, and fired. The sound exploded in the small space, echoing up the stairs. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing there, just the faint sound of laughter drifting away. They left the house in silence. None of them spoke the entire walk back to the truck, not until the youngest deputy broke. "Sir," he said quietly, "what if the stories were true?" Marlowe didn't answer. But that night, he couldn't sleep. The words kept replaying in his mind. "Ain't no law down here." He returned alone 2 days later, flashlight in hand, revolver on his hip. He told no one. The trail was easier to find this time, like the forest wanted him to come back. The air was warmer, the smell worse. When he reached the farmhouse, the trap door was already open. He went down, one step at a time, the light trembling in his grip. The stairs seemed endless, the stone turning damp beneath his boots. Then the tunnel widened, revealing a cavern lined with bones. Dozens of them, human, animal, impossible to tell apart. Some still had bits of flesh clinging to them, others were carved into shapestools, ornaments, even utensils. In the center of the room was a table, a long rough-hewn thing, dark with age, and something else. On it sat a feast straw meat, glistening in the lantern light, and beside it, a row of skulls arranged like trophies. Marlowe lifted the light higher, and saw movement in the shadows beyond the table. Shapes, dozens of them, watching. The first figure stepped forward, a woman at least, she had once been. Her skin was gray and stretched thin over bone, her hair a tangle of white and dirt, but it was her eyes that froze him. Wide, cloudy, hungry. "You came back," she said softly, voice cracking. "We don't get visitors no more." The others began to move closer, crawling from holes in the earth, emerging from behind broken walls. Their bodies were twisted, scarred, malnourished, but their smiles were all the same. Marlowe raised his gun, but the woman just laughed. "Don't waste it, Sheriff. We ain't what you think we are. We're what the mountain made." She took another step, and the light caught her mouth, rows of teeth sharpened like glass. "You folk up top, forget. The snow took our crops. The mine took our men. The flood took our children. And the world forgot we were still hungry." The shapes moved in closer, their whispers blending into one voice. "We survived. We still do." Marlowe fired once. The shot lit the cavern for a heartbeat hand. In that moment, he saw them all. The walls, the ceiling, every inch of stone was covered in faces, not painted, not carved, pressed into the clay, as if hundreds had tried to claw their way out before being sealed alive. He ran. He didn't stop until he saw daylight, until the house was a memory behind him. When he reached the ridge, he looked back once more. The fog was thicker now, rising like smoke, and through it, he saw figures standing in the doorway, watching him go. The next morning, when a search party went looking for him, all they found was his badge nailed to a tree and a piece of leather nailed beside it. It was his belt. Or maybe his skin. No one's gone past that ridge since. But sometimes, on still nights, hikers say they hear the sound of humming in the woods. Low and steady, like something remembering a song it learned long before people stopped listening. By the time the sheriff's badge was found nailed to that tree, Red Hollow had gone quiet. The townsfolk didn't talk about Marlowe or the Turners anymore. They shut their blinds earlier, left their porch lights burning through the night, and told the children to stay away from the hills. 2 weeks later, the county sent an investigator from Charleston to close the file. Her name was Claire Rennick, and she didn't believe in mountain legends. The drive up was endless switchbacks and fog that seemed to follow her car. The radio cut in and out, the signal eaten by static. At the edge of town, she passed the last gas station for 50 miles, a single pump under a flickering light. The attendant, an old man in a denim coat, stared at her license plate and asked without smiling, "You heading up to where that sheriff went?" When she nodded, he said only, "Bring a rope. Roads get strange up there." Claire had read the reports missing hikers' livestock mutilations, half-erased birth records from families that shouldn't exist. It all sounded like hysteria. But when she reached the base of the ridge, she felt the same pressure in the air that the rangers had described. The forest was too still, the silence almost magnetic. Her phone lost signal halfway up. The map app froze on an empty green blur. She found the Turner farmhouse just before dusk. The porch had collapsed completely, and the boards were damp with moss. The front door was open a few inches, creaking whenever the wind shifted. Inside, the air was heavy with earth and smoke. She found traces of the search team's footprints, the heel marks already softened by damp clay. But something else caught her eye: new symbols carved into the beams. Circles crossed by 3 lines, each one fresh, sap still seeping from the cuts. In the back room, she found a child's toy, a hand-carved horse made from oak, its head missing. Under it lay a scrap of paper wrapped in wax. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was old-fashioned, looping, and uneven. "We remember the hunger. We keep the pact." No signature. Outside, the light was dying fast. The tree line looked different in twilight, closer, the shadows longer, as if the trees themselves had shifted a few steps nearer. Claire set up her camera on the hood of her car and recorded her notes. Her voice sounded small in the thick air. When she played it back, there was something under her words. A hum, slow, rhythmic, almost human. That night she camped beside the car, engine off, flashlight in her lap. She couldn't sleep. Around midnight, a light appeared down the trail, small, flickering, like a lantern swaying back and forth. It stopped maybe 50 yards away. She called out, but the light didn't move. Then a voice drifted through the fog, a man's, calm and close, though she could see no one. "You're trespassing on Turner land." Claire stood, heart pounding. "I'm with the state. I'm investigating the missing persons." The voice cut her off. "Ain't no missing. They just stayed." The lantern light blinked out. The forest swallowed the sound. When dawn came, she packed and started back down the ridge. But the road wasn't where she'd left it. Tire tracks vanished into brush that hadn't been there the night before. She drove in circles for an hour before she realized the compass on her dash spun uselessly. Every direction led upward. The fog thickened until it looked like wet stone. By afternoon she reached another clearing. She didn't recognize an open patch of grass ringed by dead trees. In the center stood a wooden cross, fresh cut, with a small tin badge nailed to it. Marlowe's. Beneath it, pressed into the mud, were footprints. Dozens of them. Her recorder clicked on in her pocket, though she hadn't touched it. Static hissed for a long moment, then a voice her own played back, but slower, deeper. "They never left. They just changed." Something rustled in the brush behind her. She turned, flashlight trembling. Between the trees stood figures not close enough to see clearly, but still to be wind. She backed toward the car, whispering into the recorder out of instinct. "If anyone finds this, I think they're still here. They don't want us here." The figures didn't follow. They simply watched until the fog erased them. That night, Claire reached the edge of the valley again, or what she thought was the edge. The road led her to an old service station, the same one she'd passed the day before. Only now it looked decades older. The sign had rusted through, and the pump hose hung like a noose. The attendant's stool was empty. A lantern burning on the counter, though no one was there to light it. She drove until the gas gauge hit red. The forest didn't end. The same turn kept appearing, same fallen tree, same split in the road. The mountain had folded around her. She left the car, walking until her legs shook. The moon was bright enough to paint the leaves silver. Somewhere ahead, she heard running water. She followed the sound until she reached a small stream cutting through red clay. On the opposite bank was a wooden cabin, smoke rising thinly from the chimney. She approached slowly, calling out, "Is anyone here?" A woman's voice answered from inside, soft and steady. "You're cold. Come in and warm yourself." The door opened by itself. Warmth spilled out, real warmth, wood smoke, and something sweet. Claire hesitated only a moment before stepping in. The room was small, candlelight flickering against the walls. Old photos lined a shelf, families, minors, children in Sunday clothes. The woman stood near the hearth, her face half in shadow. Her eyes were pale, almost translucent. "You're one of them," Claire whispered. The woman smiled faintly. "One of who, child?" "The Turners." The smile faded. "No, the Turners were just the first. The mountain keeps more than their bones." Outside, the wind began to hum, low and even, the same note Claire had heard on her recording. The candles flickered in rhythm. The woman turned toward the door. "They're listening again. You should go." Before Claire could move, the woman reached out and pressed something into her hand, a small coin, worn smooth, stamped with the letter T. When Claire looked up, the cabin was empty. The fire still burned, but the woman was gone. She ran until her lungs gave out, not caring where the path led. When she finally stopped, she saw the first light of dawn through the trees, and beside her boot, half buried in the mud, was another coin. The same letter, the same weight. Asterisk, the third dawn on the ridge came without sound. No birds, no wind, only the faint hum that now lived inside Claire's ears. She had tried to sleep, sitting upright against a tree, the two coins clenched in her palm. But every time her eyes closed, she dreamed of faces moving beneath the soil like shapes underwater. When she woke, the ground was warm. The mist had turned golden, as if the sun were behind it, though she couldn't tell where the light came from. Her camera battery was nearly gone, but she switched it on anyway. The lens showed nothing but a pale glow. She turned in a slow circle, whispering into the microphone. Day 3. Lost orientation. Something wrong with the compass again? I keep hearing voices, but the recordings don't match. It's as if the sound comes from inside the mountain itself. When she stopped speaking, the recorder clicked softly, and a second voice answered her own. Keep walking. She froze. Then the light in front of her shifted, showing the outline of a path, a narrow trail, cut cleanly through the trees, leading uphill. The air smelled faintly of iron and rain. She hesitated only a moment before following it. After half an hour, she reached what looked like the remains of an old mining camp. Half collapsed, shacks leaned against the slope, their roofs covered in moss. Rusted rail tracks ran straight into a tunnel sealed with wooden planks. Someone had carved letters across the barrier. We keep the pact. The humming grew stronger near the tunnel mouth. Not a human voice now, but something layered like wind through 100 throats. Claire raised her flashlight. Each plank trembled slightly, though no wind touched them. She set the camera on a rock, pressed record, and pulled one loose. A current of warm air flowed out, carrying a whisper so soft she almost missed it. You found us. She stepped inside. The tunnel descended in a slow spiral. The deeper she went, the less her light mattered. The walls seemed to glow faintly on their own, as if minerals were catching invisible fire. In that dimness she began to see shapes etched into the rock hands' faces, the outlines of people joined together in chains. Their expressions were calm, almost serene. At the bottom the passage opened into a cavern. In its center rose a pool of still water, black as glass. The humming came from it. When she shone the light across the surface, ripples moved outward, though nothing had touched it. Her own reflection looked back only. The eyes were wrong. They were not her eyes at all. A figure appeared behind the reflection. She turned, heart hammering, but no one stood there. The reflection smiled anyway. Then it spoke in her voice. We remember the hunger. We keep the pact. The air grew heavier, pressing against her chest. She staggered backward and nearly tripped over something half buried in the clay, a badge. The same as the one nailed to the cross, still bright with polish. She lifted it and found a name engraved on the back. Marlowe, Sheriff, she whispered. The humming stopped. From the shadows behind the pool, someone answered. He stayed. The figure that stepped into the light looked almost human. The face was gaunt, the skin tinted with the same gray as the stone, but the eyes held a strange calm, as if he had been waiting a long time. The mountain gives back what it takes, he said quietly. It changes us so we don't starve. Claire shook her head. You mean it killed you? No, he said. It remembered us, and now it remembers you. The pool began to shimmer. Images rose in its surface families at dinner tables, miners descending shafts, floods swallowing houses. Every memory layered into another until the water looked like a living film reel. The voices from the images whispered the same sentence in unison. We survive. We stay. The ground beneath her boots pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. She dropped the badge and ran for the tunnel, the hum chasing her upward. But the way back had changed. The turns led in circles, the ceiling lowered, the air thinning until each breath felt like stone dust. When she finally reached daylight, the sun had shifted. The ridge looked different, new trees where old ones had fallen. The road moved slightly west. She stumbled toward her car, but the car wasn't there. Only her camera lay on the ground, lens cracked, still recording. She picked it up. The last frame showed her standing in the doorway of the mine, expression blank, eyes pale and clouded. A voice came from the recording, one she didn't recognize. You can go, if you promise to remember us, she whispered into the microphone. I will. The screen went dark. Days later, hikers on the southern trail found her car parked by the old service road. The door open, the seat soaked through from rain. The police marked it another disappearance. The report said she probably fell into the river during a storm. They never mentioned the audio file recovered from the camera. On it, her voice speaks for the first 10 minutes, standard notes, compass readings, weather, then silence, then humming, and finally, at the very end, a sentence spoken in her tone but slower, older, as if coming from deep underground. The mountain remembers every step. No one who's gone to that ridge since has stayed overnight. Locals still hear the hum on calm evenings, especially after rain. Some say it's the wind moving through the caves. Others swear it's the people who refused to leave. Their breath turned to song, keeping the pact alive. If you ever drive the old service road and your radio fades to static, listen closely. Beneath the noise you might hear a faint chorus repeating your own words, a heartbeat late just enough to make you wonder which side of the speaker they're really on. Asterisk. If you ever find yourself driving through the Appalachian backroads, keep an eye on the fog that clings to the ridges. The locals say it's not weather, it's memory. Every story that ended here still breathes somewhere under the trees. If this story stayed with you tonight, share it with someone who likes to wander too far from the map. And if you want to hear what else the mountains are still whispering, stay tuned. There are more names, more hollows, more pacts waiting to be remembered, because the mountain never forgets. It only waits for you to listen.